They say great leaders aren't born, they're made. And Joe has been tested by some of history's most painful chapters.
I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, when the schools were segregated. My father was not an educated man. He was a laborer for the Santa Fe Railroad, but he knew very well that education was very important. So every A I brought home, my father would give me a dime, and that was a good incentive at that age and at that time.
But it was at school that Joe came face to face with the first of many struggles.
Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas is my class. In 1954, I was in grade school when the Supreme Court concluded that separate but equal schools were not legal and ultimately desegregated the school systems throughout the United States.
But Joe wasn't done etching his name in the history books. He went on to study engineering at West Point, where he became one of the few African Americans to graduate in his class.
Beyond the fact that I was one of four, we were all newly commissioned officers, and we all anticipated that we would be going to Vietnam in fairly short order, and of course we all wanted to.
And his service wouldn't go unnoticed. During his 2 tours in Vietnam, Joe was featured in the Oscar-winning documentary, The Anderson Platoon. Pretty impressive.
After Vietnam, I went to become a plant manager for General Motors. I made the transition from leading people with rifles to leading people with wrenches, and the challenge continued.
After 13 years at GM, Joe decided to test his leadership skills yet again, this time at the helm of his own company.
I had the opportunity to buy this company called Chivas Products. I cashed in all of my assets and reserves, which amounted to several $100,000. My home and everything else was at risk.
The risks were big, all right. With its products plagued by quality issues, Chivas had to seek bankruptcy protection at one point. But it was during these early years that Joe developed a signature turnaround strategy, giving workers the high-tech tools that they, and he, needed to succeed.
These 5-axis machines here would allow individual parts to be produced at extremely high tolerance, and that gives us a competitive advantage.
An advantage that hasn't just paid off for Joe, but for Detroit's workers as well. Even as the city's manufacturing sector collapsed, Joe continued to buy companies and invest in their infrastructure, saving hundreds of jobs and sparking serious growth.
The revenue for the 6 previous companies that I had was about $750 million, and that $750 million now is up over $1.3 billion.
Yeah, Joe has done a lot of good for Detroit. And now, he's taking the time to enjoy the good life himself.